Hi there. Welcome to this visual lecture on building REST APIs using JAX-RS in Quarkus. So let's get started. First of all, we'll go through some of the basics so that I can make sure we all are on this same page. So what is REST? REST stands for Representational State Transfer. It is an architectural style that lays down some protocols, some rules for exchange of data between client and the server, right? In REST, each piece of data is treated as a resource, and these resources are accessed using an URI, Uniform Resource Interface. Some of the features of REST are stateless. So any REST API is stateless. It doesn't, neither the client nor the server stored the information about the resource. Then there is uniform interface to access the resource, right? And then there's client server decoupling. Neither client nor server know about each other. Then there's cacheability. So the data can be cached on the client or the server side. Then there is a layered system architecture. Now, what is HTTP? HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. It is an stateless, extensible, and connectionless application layer protocol. It perfectly fits in the requirements of RESTful architecture, and that's why it's widely used for implementing RESTful APIs. So here is an example of HTTP request and response. So HTTP request will usually contain a version, the URL, HTTP methods. These are contained in request headers, and there is HTTP body, right? So if you want to save something to the database, you will send that information in the HTTP body. Then there is HTTP response on the right. So an HTTP response will contain a status. Then there are response headers. Then there is HTTP body. So if you're sending a GET request, you want to fetch something from the database, from the API, that data will be contained in HTTP body. Now JAX-RS. So JAX-RS stands for Jakarta RESTful Web Services. It is a specification that provides support for creating RESTful web services in Java. So specifications helps in standardization so that there are no competing standards, right? For example, countries standardize which side the steering wheel of the car must be present, right? So let's say if cars companies were free to give the steering wheel on whichever side, that would be a lot of chaos. So that's why that's where standardization comes into play, right? So JAX-RS provides us with annotations to create RESTful APIs. Some of the main JAX-RS annotations are get, post, put, delete. These are the HTTP verbs. Get is used when we want to fetch something, post when we want to send something to the server and eventually save it to database. Then there is put if we want to update something. Then there's delete if we want to delete some resource. Then there is path, produces, consumes, and then query param and path param. So now let's jump to the terminal and let's see how we can use these. So I am at the terminal and I'll simply cd into a directory, and then I've pasted it command. So basically what we are doing is we are creating a Quarkus project using Quarkus Maven plugin. The version I'm using is 392. The create goal is used. The project group ID is auto demo, and artifact ID is JAX-RS demo. Right. Right now I'm using REST Jackson extension. So Jackson library is used for serialization and deserialization of objects. So we'll see in the example where it is used. This REST in earlier versions of Quarkus was called small ri reactive or Quarkus reactive, something like that. But from 3.9 version of Quarkus, it is called simply REST. So I'll press enter. I'll cd into the project and I'll open the project in my IDE. So as you can see, IntelliJ is doing some bootstrapping. So let's wait. So this is our project structure. So there is some code already present. For example, this greeting resource, but we'll go ahead and delete it. Okay. So let's get started. So first of all, I'll give you a TLDR summary. So in case you are in a hurry, you can watch this and understand like how easy it is to create REST APIs in Quarkus. So I'll simply create a package named controller. Then inside that controller package, I'll create a Java class called, let's say we are building a bookstore. So we are building APIs for a bookstore, online bookstore. So book controller. So to simply make an API, we need to mark a class with path, and when we need to provide the path. So let's say we'll use /book. So if someone wants to use the methods that we are going to write, that person needs to access /book. So let's create a function public string hello, right? What this will simply do is return a string. Right, and this is it. To create a REST API in Quarkus, we need to mark a class with path parameter, which will tell you like which path to use to access the resource, and then we can mark a method with the HTTP work. For example, we are using get here. So whenever we'll send a get request to /book, we'll get a hello. So I'll simply go to the terminal. I'll run the command mvnw quarkus :dev. This will run Quarkus in dev mode. Right. So as you can see, server is listening on localhost 8080. I'll go to that. So this is welcome page that they provide, but I'll go to my /book URI and press enter, and this is hello. So this is easy. Now let's say we need to provide a name to it. So what we can do is we can use a path parameter. So let's see what it is. So let's say I want to provide the name in the path. So what the client will do is /book /name, right? So and now we want to access this name. So what we'll do is iterate path param and provide the name of the path parameter, which will be string name. Right, now what we can simply do is return the name as well. So I'll again go to my web page and press reload. Okay, so let's say I'll slash Vardhan and hello Vardhan, right? So it was able to consume this path parameter, which is Vardhan in this case. Now, you might have also seen that some of the request contains something like this, right? Salutation or whatever. These are separated by and ampersand sign. So these are called query parameter, right? So we can use something like this as well. So let's say how we can do that. So similar to path param, we have query param, and let's say name of that query param is salutation. String right, and then we want to append salutation before the name, right? Right, let's say salutation is Mr. and I press enter. So right, this is as easy as this. You might have wondered that I haven't not restarted my server. This is because of dev mode in Quarkus, right? It makes coding fun, right? For example, and now just in this TLDR summary, I'll just take, let's say, uh, uh, you want to take something from the client, right? So yeah, and want to save that to the database. So how you can do that? So I'll simply create a package inside org.demo called entity. This is the entity that will be saving to our database. That entity will be a book, and right now I keep it simple and just the book will have a title, right? I'll generate the getters and setters, right? And I'll also generate the toString method. So now what I'll do is create a post request which is used to send data to the server. I'll still return a string and let's call it save. It will be a book, and oops, I'll simply return book dot toString, right? So just one more thing, the methods must be public if you want to uh, treat them as URI targets. So that's it. Let's say how we can send a post request. So I'll be using Postman, which is used for API testing, and we'll use it to send requests to the server. So I'll simply create a new request, HTTP request. We'll create a post request to http://localhost 8080, and then on book. Body will be JSON, and the payload will be just JSON form of book. The title will be the, let's say, alchemist, right? Let's see if we get this back as a string. Yeah, so that's how we send data to the server. So that is it for the TLDR summary. So let's now create something useful, right? So we'll create a API for our online bookstore, right? So I'll just simply delete this. And first of all, what I'll do is define more things in our book. So let me delete all this as well. And so a book will have title, and IDs are important. Then a book will have an author. Then it will have a publishing date or published on, right? So these are all the things. Then I'll simply generate the getters and setters, and also toString in case it is needed. Right. So now, first of all, we'll create a get request. So public, it will give us a list of books, right? We want all the books. So get all books, and it should return all the book. So for that, we'll need a service. So that way, what we can simply do is service dot get all, and then it shall return a list of all the books. So for that, I'll create a new package called service, and so we'll call the inventory service. Inventory service. We'll make it an interface because we'll inject it, right? So the methods it will have is, first of all, list book get all, then book get by ID, and if you provide an ID, it will return the book with that ID. Then we have boolean delete, will also take an ID and will delete that book. Then we have update, right, to update the book. And then there must be add, to add a book, right? So this interface seems very coupled to a single resource, which is book. So let's use generics for that. So it shall be T don't worry, and instead of book, let's generalize as an item, right? So now T can represent any resource. Let's say you want to make a movie API, so that's why, right? So all good. Now we'll create an implementation of this. I'll create a Java class. This will be called book inventory service. So this will implement inventory service and book. The data type we'll be dealing with is book. Now let's implement all the methods. Implement methods. I'll press enter. These are all the methods. So first of all, I'll just create a list of books, right? We'll call this inventory, right? And so if we want to get all, then simply we'll return the inventory. If we want to get by ID, we'll just for loop all the books from the inventory, and if the book's ID is equals to the ID that the client wants, we'll simply return that, right? Otherwise it will return null. This is right now this API is very primitive. Usually returning null is not a good practice, but it's okay for now. Now to delete a book, simply we'll have a book to delete, and get by ID, we'll get that book. So if book to delete is not null, right? If it is not present, if it is present, I mean, then what we'll simply do is inventory dot remove book to delete and return true. We'll need to keep this in, otherwise return false, right? So that's how we delete a book. We get by ID the book. If that book is indeed present, that is not null, we'll simply call inventory.remove. Then update. So what we can simply do is, first of all, let's make sure that the book is indeed present. So right, if book to update is not null, it means it is present. Then what we can do is inventory dot remove book to update, and inventory dot add the item, which is a book that the user provide, right? And then simply return the item. Otherwise return null. Then if you want to add book, we still want to check if that ID is already present. So book to add equals to get by ID item dot get ID. If book to add equals to null, then simply inventory dot add that item, return that item. Otherwise return null, right? So get by ID gives null, which means the book with that ID is not present. Then we add it to the inventory. Otherwise we do nothing, right? So our API is ready, our service is ready. Now we need to inject that service. So we'll inject the inventory service. We're dealing with books, and let's name it service. Now that is it. It shall return all the books. So we have created a get target, which will return all the books. So let's populate the inventory with some books. So I'll create a constructor. So that way, whenever the object is injected, the books are initialized. So inventory equals to, I've copied this code. So let me first create a constructor. So actually, let me add title second, right? So that's it. So what this code does is it simply creates a new array list with some books, right? So these are the books I have added, right? So everything looks fine. Now let me simply go to Postman. I'll simply create a new collection, name it JAX-RS, and I'll add a new request in that, which will be a get request to HTTP, right? So this shall send all the books. Say the server error. So let me restart the server. Okay, so we forgot to inject our service. So book inventory service, let's inject it. Let's make it singleton. So single instance is injected. Now it should be fine. Let's rerun it. Let's again hit send, and we have the list of all our books. And now let's complete our CRUD API by adding the rest of the endpoints. So then we can have another get endpoint. So in this case, we'll provide an ID, and you need to, the server must return that book. So I'll use a path param. So this is how we do it. Public, it will return a book. Get book, and path param ID, right? So we can now use the ID. Serve, what we'll simply do is return service dot get by ID and provide the ID, right? So we can test this as well. So I'll simply duplicate this request. Let's name it get by ID, and let's pass ID 21, and it should return, yeah. So it returns by ID. Then what we can do is add something. So we can create a post endpoint for it. So public book save add book. Let's name it add book. It takes a book and adds it to the inventory. return service dot add book. Simple as that. Let's try that as well. Let me copy the payload. Let me duplicate this request. Add to DB. Let's name this request add to DB. It will be a post request this time, and the payload, the HTTP body, will be of JSON format. So let's make it ID 27. Name the Batman. Right. Now if I'll send, it should add this book. And it does return the book. Let's get all books and see if it is added. And indeed it is added. Right, so post is done. Now we have delete. So this will delete the ID. So we'll take the ID as a path parameter, similar to what we did earlier. Right, so public boolean, it will return true or false, delete book. And let's, how can we access that? Using path parameter, id, int id, simply service dot delete, and I'll provide the id. Right, okay, we need to return it. So let's try that as well. I'll duplicate this, make it a delete request, provide it with ID 27, the same resource we created. So let me press delete, and if we get all so resource is not present, the book is not present with ID 27. So after delete we can update. Let me use now put to update. So we'll get the ID, public return the book, and update book. We'll take the ID from the path param, and the book itself, service dot update, then ID and book, and that is all. We'll need to use return. Let's test this. Let's duplicate the post one. It will be a put request, and in the body, right, so let's say this one, copy this payload. So let's say we want, so also, yeah, we need to So first let's add this because we removed it last time. So I'll send a post request to add it, then I'll send a put request to update it, right? So I don't know who the author is. So let's say we want to update the author to Vardman, right? And also need to send the ID 27, and it should update. It did return the updated one. Let's get all. And yes, indeed, author is updated. So I think we have created a decent CRUD API. You might have not noticed that the runtime does all the parsing or serialization, right? It decides the response code and all those things. So instead of this, you can also, like, instead of sending the book directly, you can send a response, right? For example, let's update this one. So if I return a response, I'll just wrap a book in a response. So what we'll do is simply return response dot okay, and inventory. So let's make it more useful. So we'll keep the book written by inventory, sorry, service dot get by ID in this, and if book is equals to null, what we'll send is return response dot status. We can set status to let's say 400. Bad request, I think. Let's send 404. Response dot status dot, I think we need to build it. Yeah, otherwise simply return response dot okay, and we can send our book with that. Dot build, right? So we can explicitly set the status to 200, which is okay, right? So now if we try to fetch something which is not in the database, for example, let me write a random number. This, I hope this is not present, which should get a 404 not found, right? Then maybe we can create an error object or something like that, and we can send, and then client can consume. So yeah, that's it.